Hello and welcome to Mooks and Monsters. I'm Rob Ward,
And I'm Tim Niederreiter, and this is episode 118 of the podcast.
and today we're going to be talking about keeping the game fresh. Now, oftentimes when you game with the same crowd and the same people, same DGM, same game system, things tend to get a little stale. Your explorations have been kind of um, uh, just are gone after a while. The reason I bring this up today is because I was thinking about what one of my friends said.
Mm.
He and his group have been playing D&D for years. Like
Yeah.
before, I want to say like a good 5-6 years, maybe something like that together. That group,
Mm-hmm.
and they're really into the mechanics of the game, and they're that sort of crowd. And he was asking me about Shadowrun, because they figured out that they're getting they got so good at D&D, um, too good that there's nothing exciting anymore for it. And I totally understand where that comes from. Playing the same system, uh, you all have very similar characters. That you have a niche that you fill. Um, you do one thing or another, and yeah, I understand why they would switch over to a different game. So
Yeah.
with that said, Tim, you and I have been gaming on and off together we've known each other for about 8 years now.
Yeah, and game together for a good half of that, at least, we could say.
hmm Yeah, we don't game as often because of the distance, but
Yeah.
we have an idea of how we feel each other out and how we keep the games fresh between us, because we keep popping off new ideas for games themselves.
Right. As
So
guys who, sorry, go
yeah,
on.
no, go ahead.
As we are people who like to design scenarios and work on stuff, and obviously this podcast about gaming. So in some ways, we are more engaged on the development level than a lot of people would be. Uh,
True.
but and so that's one reason games tend to be fresher. I mean, I don't actually game that much in person lately, which is a damn shame. Hopefully my new Mutants and Masterminds game will start up this month, so that'll be awesome. But even that game is my return to Mutants and Masterminds after quite a while of not running it. And I think changing systems is one way to shake up a game, shake up a group's expectations,
hmm
especially if you go from a game like D&D and then you switch to a system where you don't have the same roles. You know how D&D, you have the tank, you have the mage or the damage, that kind of thing. You got the healer. Well, if you switch to a game where the players are doing different roles in combat, that could be a great way to immediately increase the novelty. But it
hmm
comes with its own risks, of course.
Of course, yeah. It's just like come yeah. I wanted to explain that coming with the own risk, like having the people play the same roles over and over and over and over again.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
that like have you done that? Like, have you seen that happen in a game before, where you kind of realize that everyone's kind of doing the same thing they've been doing uh a year ago or
I
two
mean,
years ago?
I haven't run enough games that were long term, but I have noticed that, I mean, everyone kind of has a preference, right? Your characters, well, your characters tend to be more varied because you like to play different kinds of people. So you
hmm
don't really care as much about what they can do, I would say. I mean, at least it's not as important to you
hmm
what their abilities are. But there are some people who really want to have a character that's very adaptable or has the ability to, and adaptable in its own right is kind of interesting because of what they adapt to do is interesting. But there's lots of of players. I know I can name a couple in our group, that in our mutual group, the circle, that
hmm
have kind of a thing that they tend to do.
Yeah,
But mostly
like
our
I'm
group's pretty
usually
good.
the brute. Like when I do fall into a niche, I'm usually the brute.
That's true. Yeah. And I'm not sure what my niche tends to be because I don't actually run. I mean, like lately, I haven't played a whole lot of games. So I don't know what it would be now. Uh, at the last 3 or 4 years, I barely played any games. I've run a few, but I've barely played any.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, what I remember of your playing, you there's this concept in improv called pirate, robot,
Mhm.
ninja, and during a scene, the pirate who is the well, there's different types of improvisers where, like, I'm a pirate, for example, because I just go out to the wall and I just, I don't try to uh, draw the narrative in any way. I just kind of go out there and just throw stuff to the wall.
Mhm.
Um, the robots are the people that try to, make
They have a
sense
mission.
of the narrative for. Yeah, they have a mission. Not that the characters don't have missions, but they kind of see two and two. They see like, oh, this person's doing this and this person's doing that. It'd be really cool if this happened, and they try to drive it towards that. And the
Yeah.
ninjas, the people that kind of add support.
Right. And
And I
I think
always,
we've talked about this before. Yeah.
yeah, and I always felt like you were the ninja of the group.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so like support classes, and usually.
Oh, that's a good point. I mean, again though, I mean, yeah, I suppose you're right. And I was just thinking a few of the games that I played in when with you around. I mean, of course, there's one game, and there's some games where the roles aren't supported mechanically, like D20 Modern or
Mm-hmm.
D20 Mafia is kind of like that, because basically anybody can do anything, at least at low levels. It's pretty easy to be the guy who does something different, not based on your class, right?
Oh yeah,
And
totally.
though my character he was kind of class. I mean, my character was definitely the brute assassin character in that game. He was very much a brutal character, if I recall. And that was one of the few games where I kind of was in the center of the action a lot because my character was just doing things that weren't a good idea a lot, which is
Yeah,
always fun.
which is great. But yeah, kind of going back to our topic,
Mm-hmm.
um, keeping it fresh. Some methods that I see, you've mentioned it before, was trying something else with the character. Um, because if you know who's going to be the brainiac, who's going to be the brute, who's going to be the this class and that, try switching it up for a bit.
Yeah.
Like I think one of the funnest games we've had is that Reese's game we keep on talking about on the show, where I played the kind of the Crassus of the group,
Mm-hmm.
and our friend John, who usually plays kind of the brainy characters, was the brave hero this time.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so changing up what you're playing is, as far as characters goes, is a way to keep it fresh. Or at the beginning, I mentioned that a group switched over to a totally different game,
Yeah.
and that's also a great idea, because once in it just doesn't. You just kind of, all right, run its course, and
Mm-hmm.
you want to try something new and different.
Yeah. For example, I
Um,
mean, with me, I mean, I
mhm.
ran Mutants and Masterminds for 4 years, and then I started running Rhesus for quite a while. And this is my main system I ran for a while. Same thing.
Yeah, absolutely, because you saw a lot of opportunity there, and you felt like, oh, this could be a really fun thing for us to do.
Mm-hmm.
But say that you want to keep on playing the same game,
Yeah.
and your players kind of are comfortable with characters they have, or they feel like they're good with what they have. How do we keep our games as GMs fresh? Because usually, um, GMs tend to fall into several like things that they are known for. For example, I was watching this guy talk about his he runs a YouTube channel. I don't know his name, but how to be a great GM. Guy,
Yeah.
that's his name.
Yeah.
And he was saying that he was GMing a game, and he had this habit of, oh, the helping NPCs are actually the villain all along, and he
Mm.
would keep on doing that. And one of his players go, right, I'm not going to game with you anymore because you always do this to us. I'm not doing it, and they haven't played together since. And it was a failing because you keep on using one tool too
Yeah.
much, and people expect that of you, and they know. Like in boxing, you wouldn't just throw a jab.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to mix it up, or they'll know exactly what you're going to do next,
Hmm.
and they will know how to beat you. In this case, it
Ex-
means your players will get bored.
Precisely, yeah. And it's you need to have variety. You need so
Yeah, it's a good
I
question.
would ask I would actually ask your character, your players, just kind of in a setting that's not your game.
Mm.
Just like, so what is the Rob Ward style of game? Well, how do you know it's a Tim Niederreiter game?
Mhm.
And you and I are kind of aware of that because we've asked each other and we've asked our players quite a few times of what to expect in our games, and that allows us to come up with more material or different storylines.
Yeah. Though I still think I fall into this problem quite a bit. I mean, I have lately, or the last two games I ran,
Hmm.
up until, especially in Mutants and Masterminds. That's one of the reasons I quit running it for a while. And I'm getting back to it now, but I quit running it because I felt like I was doing the same thing over and over. It was always a big battle, you know. It was like one big battle with one or more supervillains, and that was kind of the game each session. And that gets old, and it got old for me very quickly. I just didn't know how to stop doing it, so I switched systems. But as
Hmm.
far as making, but I think I could switch. I could shake it up a lot more because there's a lot more to superheroes than just superhero battles.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
Especially when you have characters like, actually, there was a character I played in another game where my character had major super senses. Like, he had ridiculous super senses. I think he'd be a really cool, and I think that kind of character, not to toot my own horn, but that kind of character, there's always something like that to most character, to like a Mutants and Masterminds character, that you
Hmm.
can exploit and do something different with it, as in to hook the player in a different way. So my character had a super sense of smell. What if he smelled something that didn't make any sense to him? That kind of thing. You can get to the PCs, the players, through their characters. And I think that's one way to shake it up. Like, I mean, because that never actually happened in the game. I'm not blaming that game master. It's not bad. That game didn't run for a huge amount of time anyway. So he
Hmm.
wasn't really grasping for things to do, right? Uh, but if you're looking to change something, I think look to the players is important. Or because there's kind of two possibilities I see. It's like, what, dive into what the characters are right now, or change something that makes the characters change or makes them have to adapt to the world, or do a side story. I guess that's three things.
Yeah, absolutely. Like those are all great tools to kind of just switch it up a notch, and it's great that you realize, you like the session becomes the same after a while,
Mhm.
um, and that it becomes less fun each time.
Yeah,
So you do try to look for those opportunities to try something different. Um,
absolutely. And it can be a simple thing too. It can be something, or it can be as simple as changing a dial on, like, I like to think of it, and this is kind of a writer. I've heard this on Writing Excuses, the podcast with Brandon
mhm,
Sanderson. A long time ago, they talked about this, how there's, like, in a story, there's the different dials. You've got your tension dial, your humor dial, whatever. You can turn them up and turn them down to get different kinds of story or different kinds of feel. So if
hmm,
you turn up the humor dial, sounds like a weird kind of animal now. If you turn up the dial for humor,
mhm.
then that'd be like the Mutants and Masterminds game I ran last, which, was actually the prelude to this new game I'm starting, which involved things like the Butter Butler, who was a character who was made of butter, and he was one of the supervillains they encountered. He was a butler made of butter. Duh. Uh, so it was a very silly. There was a lot of silly stuff in that game, and it was very different from a lot of the Mutants and Masterminds stuff I've approached before, which is much more dark and uh, gritty in some ways, or at least violent. Uh,
Mhm.
so yeah, that kind of thing, that kind of approach. But if I put the Butter Butler into, say, the Corporate Supers game, he might still fit there. I mean, superhero
Oh
games, you can
yeah.
basically put anything in, and he'd make the game a lot sillier right away. And that game was not that silly. I mean, there's some fun stuff in it. I mean, it's a game, it's fun, people have a good time if you do it right. But in that game, it was much more serious as far as what characters were actually dealing with, as opposed to this guy who's like this weird gelatinous butterman.
Mhm.
Anyway, it's just,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so introducing a new element can really work that way. An
Oh,
element
sure.
that
And
changes the tone a
would
little
you
bit.
say that mood, like just changing the mood of the game itself, could lend itself to something
Yeah,
of that sort?
absolutely. I mean, like, or even raising the stakes. That's another of the dials you can fool around with in storytelling.
Mm.
And I remember there's the one particular game where the stakes became very high. It was an episode of our recess game. It was actually the last one we played, I think. Remember that? We've talked about it on the show, where you guys
Yes.
created this whole conspiracy, and I think that was the one where right after it, one of John turns to me and he says, or it was shortly after that. I was like, it doesn't always have to be that tense, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a different session, but he did definitely tell me that after one session of that game. And I thought that was kind of a high compliment to me because he was really invested. This was late in the campaign. Obviously, I think it was the last one I ran for it. And it kind of, I mean, it was kind of it made me feel really good because I was like, okay, I did dial up the tension. He felt that, you know? And that's not necessarily always the case in that campaign. It wasn't anyway.
No. If anything, there were some that were very much, just us kind of shooting the shit and just plotting.
Yeah.
Which I love that concept, and I love it so much that I'm starting to write a game about just plotting and being
Machinations.
big bad guys. Yeah. But
go on.
With something like the mood, say that you're running Mutants and Masterminds, and it's kind of becoming stale. Instead of having the Golden Age of Superheroes game, have the grungy 90s super realistic.
Iron Age.
Yeah, Iron Age. Yeah. Have that go on. Or
there's lots of ways you can change it, because most genres you have a different source, Yeah, you have different sources you can draw from. Maybe your Call of Cthulhu game is going to take a turn and be more like a different author than like an H.P. Lovecraft story, because H.P. Lovecraft wrote very particular kinds of stories, and that very much inspired the game. But there's a whole mythos there. I forget the name, but the author of the King in Yellow.
I forget his name right now.
That book of short stories. I'm reading that book of short stories right now, and it's not very Cthulhu-esque. I mean, there's always a sense of dread, so that's similar. But this is one of the works that inspired Lovecraft, yet it falls into the same genre, but it's quite different. So that's the kind of thing. Like if you look for a different source of material, you can twist your game just a little towards something different.
Well, that's a beautiful thing about running Call of Cthulhu, is that it's very much a mood game. There's dread and terror and horror, but the way that it's coming in is always, it can be different. You don't always have to have like deep ones, coming out of the ocean. Yeah, it could be as much as a disease.
Oh, that's such a great idea.
Just, weird things are happening. Like, there's a spoilers for Delta Green, so skip ahead. There's a module called like The Last Equation or something, and it's about this. Like it starts off with this kid, going on a shooting spree at this certain house, and they realize that there's something with this equation that he figured out because he's a college student. Very long time coming that this hasn't been found. That it kind of represents the universe, this equation. And so there's no way to fight it, really. You just have to contain it.
Yeah, make sure no one else learns it. Yeah.
Secret. Exactly, yeah.
Top men will look at that equation in a box somewhere. No one will see it ever again. No, that's awesome. I mean, I love that kind of thing, and that kind of eeriness, and that's actually one of the other things that could work. I think it could work very well for Mutants and Masterminds as well. This kind of twist where it's not a monster, it's not a villain, it's just a thing. It's a force of nature. It's a weird event that now you have to struggle against. That's something superheroes don't deal. Yeah, weather. Exactly. What if there's a hurricane or some unexplained, and it could result in a supervillain? Like, okay, unexplained weather phenomena that's devastating. Now your heroes are running around saving people, but also what if there could be a supervillain behind it? That's the Mutants and Masterminds example. Or there's an evil god or cult behind it in the Call of Cthulhu example. So, I mean, as long as the players are clued in to this event isn't normal, this is an unnatural thing that's happening, then they can explore it. And exploration is a good way to change a game, especially a Mutants and Masterminds game. I'm mostly thinking about that because Call of Cthulhu is usually an investigative game, but Mutants and Masterminds is usually more of a fighting game or a combat game in some ways. But I think it could be, and also with the Mutants and Masterminds, you can explore different ways to use heroes' powers and stuff, because they can be saving people and instead of just fighting supervillains. And like, that's one of the things that's very interesting about, it's an interesting flaw that a lot of, comics and recent superhero movies have, is that it's all about the fighting. And there's not much actually saving people, making the world a better place kind of stuff in them. So but there was definitely a legacy of that in the genre.
Yeah, it really is like so many opportunities of that sort.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things is just changing the challenges your players are faced with is really useful.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you can do that in any genre. If the players just have to survive a winter and they're trapped and they don't, they're just, or something, surviving the
Oh yeah,
winter
then it becomes
in D&D.
survival.
Yeah, in D&D, there's not anything around. Like, it's a wasteland. You're just trying to find a way to survive. I mean, any game you could basically do that, depending on what kind of powers your heroes have or whatever, if they have any abilities at all. Or it's a political situation. So basically, changing the mood, like you can take the same characters and put them in a different story in the same world. I think that's something to think about to keep a game fresh.
Absolutely, yeah. I there's so many opportunities to do things of that sort, and it's up to you as a GM. I think we're kind of running a little low on time,
We are.
so you have all these different options to keep your game fresh, and it's about realizing that you always use this motif, you always use this setup, um, to like try something different.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, it
so
could be a simple. I want to throw in one last idea
mhm,
because I'm
go ahead.
full of ideas this game, this time, and this one is that if you focus on characters a lot, like as in NPCs, if an NPC is always a catalyst for your story, try making that not the case. Make it something that's only in the players' heads or no players' domain. Anyway, that's just a
Nice,
thought.
yeah.
Yeah. Kick it to
No,
them.
it's a good idea.
Yeah. Anyway,
Very. But yeah, this has been of Mooks and Monsters. You can find us at mentalcellarpublications.com. You can email us at podcast@mentalcellarpublications.com. You can like our page on Facebook. You can follow us both on Twitter. I'm at StageHat. Tim's at Teen Needle Rider. Um, yeah, and we can be found wherever podcasts can be found.
yeah, hosted by Libsyn, and you can find my new book, Stormfleet, on Amazon right now. If you like space opera, check that out. It's Stormfleet, first Pillar Universe book. So there's your
It's
plug
gonna be
for the
great.
week. What?
It's gonna be great.
Oh, it is. It already is. All right. Have a good one, folks.